So a couple of years ago, I asked one of my best friends if he would like to join me in playing the critically acclaimed MMO Final Fantasy XIV. I've been playing it for almost 10 years at this point, I think. I've honestly lost track of how many hours. But I thought that he was going to pick up the game and he was going to love it, and we were going to have this awesome opportunity to make new memories in this game that I love, that he could now love, and that was not the case. He had to restart the game not once, not twice, but 3 times, until he finally got to a point where he was able to say that he appreciated and enjoyed the game that he was playing. And I had to think about that, and I was like, why? And it got me thinking, well, what's happening for a new player in 14? And eventually I came to this idea of, I just think that 14 is too big at this point. I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. I enjoy it. I enjoy getting the opportunity to go to the Sea of Clouds and then have another opportunity to go to Ralger's Reach and then go to Thavnair. I love the locations in 14, and I love the amount of detail that is put into every single expansion, into every single one of their areas. But there's a critical thing missing from my perspective that a new person has. And that's, I've already done so much of the work to get to where I am now that I never have to look back and be like, oh man, I've got to make sure that I'm doing this, and that, so that way I can be ready for this expansion. I just have to log in, and whenever the new expansion's out, I can just start up and I can play it and I can enjoy it however I want. But then I asked, would a new player even want to get to Endwalker? Would a new player want to get to Shadowbringers? Even, would a new player want to get to Stormblood? If I'm advertising this game to a friend, and I'm using the classic copy-pasta quote, saying, have you heard of the critically acclaimed MMO Final Fantasy XIV with a free trial that goes all the way up into the award-winning Heavensward, now Stormblood expansion? What am I advertising? What am I highlighting? I'm highlighting points of the game that a player's not going to get to for probably well over 40, 50, maybe sometimes 70 hours, at least just to get to Heavensward. That's just for somebody who might just be doing the bare necessities to get to the main story. And yet, those are the points in which we highlight, in which we culturally have said, this is the part where this is what's gas, this is what's needed, this is what we need to do. And yet, we have to remember that in order for them to get to those points, they still have to get through a Realm Reborn. And then they have to get through post Realm Reborn. Again, this isn't to say that there's anything wrong with a Realm Reborn, but I think that it's important to see that as new players enter into this game, and as the game's lifecycle continues to go on and on and on and on, the amount of stuff that a new person has to do to catch up to where some people might want to be is insane. If you use the idea that every expansion is probably 40 to 60 hours long, and you're looking at anywhere between 200 to 300 hours of playtime just to get caught up in the game, and that's a lot. Now, some people might say, oh yeah, but as you go throughout the game, you'll fall in love with it, and then you'll want to do it. And while that might be true, there's a lot of games in my Steam library that I love, that I've finished, that I have not put 300 hours into. Not every game is designed to be that long, and sure, MMOs are a different beast. They're meant to be games that you play for long periods of time. But then we have to ask, are they going to want to be there at the end of the road? At the end of those 200 to 300 hours, are they going to want to keep going with the game? Because remember, that's all that they're doing to catch up to where some people might want to be. For some people, they don't care about Realm Reborn. For some people, they don't care about Heavensward. They don't care about Stormblood. What they have is a recommendation given by their friends to say, play this game. They see where their friend's at. Their friends might show them a gameplay video of them doing a raid or a trial and say, that's really cool, I'd like to join you in doing that. And then you tell them, okay, that's fine. But in order to do that, you're going to have to sift through 300 hours of story content to get to where I need to be, in order to do dungeons with me, in order to do raids with me, in order to do the content that was advertised to you, that you might see in promotional material for this game, or in trailers. In order to do that, and to join us, you have to go through so much of this story in order to get there. And for some people, they may not even care about the story. And again, that sounds like a heathenish thing to say, but it exists. And if it exists, then we have to consider, okay, what is the experience that we're giving to people if we're asking them to join our community, if we're asking them to become a part of the community of 14? I think that it's crazy that there are certain people who tend to categorize 14 and what its community is into an archetype of people that enjoy this central aspect of it, right? There are individuals who can claim 14 is a game where everybody enjoys a story, and I don't think that's to be true. And that's not a bad thing, but that's indicative of the fact that 14 is a game that caters to many different types of players. Are you a casual person who enjoys the world building of 14? Then the story is something that can be appealing to you. Are you an individual who just enjoys the difficulty in gaming and you see the raids and ultimates and savages and you're like, I want to participate in that because that is what gives me enjoyment? Then that's totally fine. Are you someone who's hyper casual and just cares about RP and crafting and gathering and just having the best house in the market? That's also fine. And each of those different ways in which we enjoy the game is valid, but it's the amount of time it takes for certain people to get to the places that they might enjoy that becomes the problem. If I want to do a Savage raid, how long is that going to take for me if I'm just somebody who only wants to play the game just to do the harder content? Or if I'm somebody who says, I want to have the coolest house on the market, I want to have all the greatest decorations, I want to have a theme, I want to have people come into my house and host like a cafe there. Well, how much money is that going to cost you? And how long is it going to take you to get that money? How long is it going to take you to level up those crafters? How long is it going to take you? And again, it's this idea of how much time does it take the average player to get to the things that they want to do? I think that it's a little bit foolish to kind of assume that every player who starts the game is going to come into it with this attitude of, I'm going to welcome the game and all of its systems and all the ways that it goes about doing things, and I will gladly walk alongside this game and enjoy it bit by bit every step of the way. And although that is a healthy way to do it, again, if you're trying to get people of all types to enjoy the game, that might prove to be a little bit difficult, because for certain people, they want to enjoy certain things and they have ideas of how they want to enjoy the game. And if the game can't present that to them in a way quickly enough, then why would they even want to continue going on? There's an easy answer that somebody can give if I said this to them, and they could say, well, if you only care about X content, or if you only care about this story in this expansion, and you don't really care about anything that came before it, why don't you just buy the skips? And I think that that's one of the most crazy statements that somebody could probably give to a new player. Somebody who still has to buy the game, still has to have an active subscription to the game, and now you're telling them to buy the story skip or the level skip to get to where they need to be for the content that they want to do. Okay, I just looked this up. If this is something that somebody tells you to do, not only do you have to buy the game, you have to have an active subscription to the game, but you also have to then buy not only the hero's journey to level up your character to the point that you want to be to progress your story, but you also have to buy the story progression. That's $50 just for that ability alone. And with the game itself being $60 on Steam and an active subscription being $15 a month, you're looking at somebody potentially shelling out $125 just to have the ability to play the game at the place that they'd want to play it. And that's before they even spent an hour into the game. They don't even know if they like the game yet with the systems that the game fully has. And obviously somebody might say, well, but that's the point of the free trial. That's the point of why we have that. And while yes, the free trial does help people to get into the game, I have to ask, does it really? Like, does it really help people to get into the game? And so I had this thought that came to me that sounds a little outlandish for some people, but to me, it sounded like an idea that could make sense. And that was simply create a new starting point in 14. And by doing that, I also mean creating a new level start for people when they're playing 14. For example, right? If you start somebody off at, let's say, level 70, right, in the Stormblood expansion, then they have access to not only all of Stormblood, but all of Heavensward, and everything that comes with that, from raids to dungeons to all of the story that they're available to do in New Game Plus, all of the tertiary content that comes alongside that. They have quick and easy access to the content that they'd want to do while still having the ability to move vertically through the game at a pace that they can now enjoy. It gives them this ability to have this horizontal progression as well as this vertical progression, because that's something that the free trial of 14 fails to do. The free trial of 14 is just a vertical progression that is gated behind the story at all times, and its systems are locked behind that. So if you wanted to do something like a dungeon, well, you can't do the dungeon until you get to X part in the story, and that's how the game paces you. And while that's fine for anybody who's progressing through it at either their own pace or at the pace of the game as they're caught up with it, for some people, the time it might take for them to vertically progress might be too much for them. And so that's where this idea of horizontal progression becomes really enticing. It allows for the player to be at a specific spot in the game already, to be able to progress into any aspect of the game that they so desire, and to be able to enjoy it for the things that they enjoy it for, which will then guide them as they're naturally playing into wanting to try other things. For example, if you start somebody off in the Shadowbringers expansion, they get the ability to experience many things potentially at once. They get the ability to experience everything that the game has to offer at the pace in which they want it. So if they're doing a raid that they might not be enjoying at that point in time, they can stop that and then they can pivot to maybe another raid of their choice, or they can just pivot to a completely different type of content, whether that just be story or that can be deep dungeon or you name it. But it's the agency that we could have that makes it so important. And I think that's where the current state of 14 for a new player is currently lacking. For a new player in 14, your hand is held the entire time, and the game tells you you cannot enjoy these things until you've done these things. And while that might be good for some players, it's not good for every player. And this doesn't have to take away from the level 1 experience. There can still be the level 1 vanilla A Realm Reborn experience, but these two things would exist side by side with each other. One wouldn't replace the other. It would just be one where they mutually live together, where there's a level 1 start and another start at an expansion that it could be really anywhere. And the only downside to this is that at the end of the day, it does create a bigger fraction within the community as to things that collectively people have experienced together, right? But I think that the trade-off is ultimately of benefit to the game. Because even though you might be getting rid of that shared experience that everyone has because they had to progress through the story together, what you create in turn is this ability where people can recommend this game to anyone who's interested in the various different aspects that this game has to offer. And that's where the highlight of 14 really exists in. The highlight of 14, as is any MMO, is the various ways in which people can enjoy it. And for those people who enjoy different things to exist in the same space together. I have friends who are both ultimate raiders and people who have never raided in their life and probably never will. But we both enjoy 14, and that's what makes the game amazing. And so, where could that new start be? Personally, I think that Dawntrail could function as a fantastic starting point for reintroducing us to the characters that we know, recontextualizing them for us, and then bringing us into this new world, this new story, and we have the ability to vertically progress through it at its normal pace, or we have the option to go and to experience what came before and all of the expansions that happened prior. And we can do that to our heart's content, whether we want to progress through A Realm Reborn all the way up to Endwalker in one playthrough, or if we want to do A Realm Reborn and then go back to Dawntrail, or if we want to do a raid in Stormblood and then go to the raid in Endwalker. But it all exists at this baseline where we have that option, we have that agency to move and to operate wherever our heart desires. And so, who knows? Would it ever be Dawntrail? Maybe. What do you think? Obviously, this is not going to be a hot opinion because there are so many people that just think that 14 needs to just be what it is and that there needs to be no change and that we have to all experience this one thing together. But if you do think that, maybe we could have a different point of where we start in the story, put your thoughts down below. I'd be interested to hear what you guys could come up with. All right, thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya!